Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Adi, and today I have another team report. I guess the first team report from Baltimore Regionals, and I am joined by one of the top players. I am joined by SplattyDaddy himself, Ethan. How are you doing?
I'm doing so great. Thank you so much for having me, Audie. It's a pleasure to be back on your channel now. What is it, 3 years later after the first time I did a team report with you? So I'm super excited. I'm really ecstatic about how, Baltimore went. And this is actually like my first season really doing competitive. I lived outside of the US for quite a while, so I wasn't actually able to get into kind of any local, Pokemon circuits or even some of like the bigger regional events where I was living abroad in both like Japan and then for a little bit I lived in the Netherlands while I was in grad school. Both Europe and Japan obviously have Pokemon scenes, but I wasn't able to really find, where to go for tournaments and things like that. So super excited to be back in the US and competing and already putting up what I thought were pretty good results for my first competitive season. So yeah, very happy to be here and kind of talk about how Baltimore went for me and my team, everything like that.
Absolutely. I'm really happy to have you. The last time we had a chance to talk was Players Cup 3, and you had built the team
Yeah.
that it's funny because you built the team, and then later on in Series 11, when they looped back to that format, that was the team that everyone was using. I think everyone called it Zine's team, but I was like, no, it's Ethan's team. The real ones know. That was really, really cool to see. And so I've been watching your career and your development ever since then, just because you're a cracked team builder, and so I'm really excited to talk about the team that you used. You said you were so ready for Baltimore. Tell me about this is how many events have you been to before this one?
Yeah, so in total in-person events, before Baltimore was my fourth. So I've been to three other events besides that, the events where I think Hartford, Connecticut, back in 2023, where I went like 3-3 and dropped. It was my first ever event. I kind of went there on a whim because one of my really good friends from college and her partner actually, her partner's a TCG player, and so they reached out to me because they're like, "Oh, you compete in Pokemon too? You should come join us." So I kind of just like had a random team that I threw together for that weekend and went. My second ever event was the Indiana Regionals, which was the first Reg G tournament, and I ended up actually placing 20th at that one. So another top 32 finish. And on my day two, I ended up losing to the eventual winner, Rajan. So couldn't be too upset about that. After that was NAIC, and I just had brought some like Eternatus jank with like Kill Swap Clefable and Terra Fairy Eviolite Rhydon. So I was kind of just throwing stuff at the wall there for fun. That was another 3-3 drop. And yeah, now we're at Baltimore in Reg H, and obviously ended up placing, 11th out of 700 and something players. So
Mhm.
quite happy with that finish and getting into, top 16. Upset to just miss out on Top Cut, but it is what it is.
Yeah, well, you did top cut. It just missed out on top 8.
Yeah, top
But
8.
yeah, you said that you were so ready for this tournament. You had the sauce and you'd locked in. And you had a really, really cool team. Tell me about your preparation and how you built this team. Yeah, how you preparation for Baltimore Regionals and how you built this team.
Yeah, so it's really funny. I mean, if there's one thing a SplattyDaddy team is going to do, it is going to be running Grim Screens. Grimmsnarl is my favorite Pokemon, I think, ever. I love the design. Prankster, as everyone knows, is cracked ability. And, in the way that I kind of approach this game, overall is I think that survivability is really important and also giving yourself space to make some mistakes in the game. I know that a lot of people, especially a lot of top players, have a lot of really clean lines figured out and everything like that. Obviously, I would consider myself to be pretty good at the game, but I also understand that, sometimes my lines of play aren't always clean. And so I really appreciate what Grimstarl brings to a lot of teams, which is survivability. And so that's kind of like where I always start out. For the most part, I will always be running Grimsnarl. on a team because I think that screens, and especially like prankster screens, are so cracked. But yeah, that tweet that you pulled up, I made it August 3rd, so that was like right after Reg H dropped on the showdown ladder. And I locked in with this team immediately. At that point, the EV spreads were a little bit different, but I can get into that because a lot of that changed literally the night before Baltimore started. But kind of the way that I was approaching this metagame is obviously, Reg H is a little bit of a lower power format. And so I was automatically thinking, right, what are some strong combinations that we already know, worked, and how can we adapt it to kind of what's going on? I think that, in the early formats before we got like the Paradox Mons and Legendaries, you already had Mouse Ape, which was really good. And I mean, it's no surprise that it's kind of made a comeback. And then this is kind of our really first lower power format where I thought that like Arc Rain could really succeed, especially once you get rid of Urshifu, which is just really annoying to play against as a screens, kind of bulky screens player. So that's where I started off. At really the very beginning of the format is just thinking about how can I tweak this team to make it, the best version of it possible. And I believe that this, almost identical team won, I want to say a Victory Road tour online. And instead of Grimmsnarl, it was an Incineroar in that slot. But, overall, I was thinking that going into this metagame, Incineroar just didn't make a lot of sense for me. Yes, it's a really good Pokemon. Yes, it was on a lot of teams in Top Cut. But there is like so much King Gambit and Annihilape running around that I just did not feel that bringing like an Intimidate Mon into a metagame with so much Defiant would really make a lot of sense. So I kind of started with like, as I said, Grimmsnarl, and then the 2-2 combinations of Mousehold Annihilape and Archaludon and Pelipper. And before I had Sinistra, I had a Mungus on the team. But honestly, I think that Sinistra, while they have similar roles, brings a lot more versatility in what it could do and what it offered the team overall. So that's kind of where I started with it all the way back in August, and then just kept tweaking it from there.
Yeah, and I mean, you hit on a lot of the things that I think are really important, for especially for early format. You had your idea and you really refined it a lot, and you got really comfortable with it. And I think that's really important, especially when you're using a Pokemon like Grimmsnarl that you have so much experience with. I think that really helps in an early format where there's a lot of different teams that you might face. Did you feel like that comfort really helped you over the course of the run?
Yeah, definitely. I think that there are always, some archetypes that I think we can see like really play into. There's a lot of players who are really committed to like hard trick room, balanced teams, things like that. And yeah, for me, I think the comfortability really does lie within kind of grim screens, especially in this format. Another thing that I was thinking is that, when people are making their calcs for the tournament, I don't think that a lot of people are necessarily running their calcs against, screens. And if they are, I don't think that they're running their calcs with screens and friend guard, which, all of the damage reduction does stack. And it really does help out a lot, which I saw in some of my sets. But this is definitely the play style that I feel most comfortable with. It's a little bit more reactive, but I feel like with a lot of the damage reduction and a lot of the combinations that you can lead with this team, there's really a lot you can do with that. And I do appreciate really both the bulk and the versatility, because I think it does go a long way in kind of helping to solve some matchups that might otherwise appear to be pretty negative for you. So that's definitely what I tend to lean back on. And obviously, it worked out really well for me going into this tournament.
Yeah. And yeah, I was actually really surprised that we didn't see more screens leading up to Baltimore, but both you and Dawe both did so well with the Grimmsnarl and Annihilape combos. I think we're going to see a lot more of it coming up in over the next couple tournaments, maybe at Dortmund regionals next week. But yeah, tell me about the team itself. Why did you choose to run the movesets, EV spreads, Terra types that you did?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I guess just going Pokemon by Pokemon, first with Grimmsnarl, which again for me is really kind of like the centerpiece of most of my teams. Originally, I was running a Terra Ghost Grimmsnarl just to get around, fake out setups that would really prevent me from getting screens up. Because that can be a problem when you're running against, hyper offense. That's something like fake out plus Choice Specs Goldango, for example, right? If they can deny you getting light screen up in the first turn and just hit you with like a Terra Steel Specs, make it rain, that can be really bad. But then I was talking with a friend, Jude, who helped me actually build this team and get all of the mons in game. We were kind of talking about which Terra types made more sense, and just looking at it, it seemed that Terra Steel Grim was probably the best thing to pivot to, just because it does give you a lot more survivability, especially again, for example, against something like a Goldango. It's like, yes, you can still be faked out, but actually being able to resist a make it rain and then like not be weak to shadow ball after was really great. It helped me a lot against when I was practicing some teams like that were running Glamora as well. Just being able to avoid poison attacks on the first turn was really awesome. And then looking at the move set, I'd say it's pretty standard. Obviously you have your two screens, Spirit Break, and in this case I went with Thunderwave over Taunt because I decided that I was running a more supportive mouse hold set, so I can throw Taunt on there, and then running with T-Wave because it gives me another option of speed control on this team. I have T-Wave, Tailwind, and Trick Room, which are all really great speed control options, and especially T-Wave, besides the fact that it can prevent a Pokemon from moving and kind of gives you a little bit of that tilt factor if you get good paralysis rolls. What I really appreciated about it in this tournament, especially, was just like the instant speed control. There was a lot of games, both in practice and in the tournament, where I could do something like just lead a Grimmsnarl and Pelipper, and be in a position where, for example, if it's against an opposing Mouse Ape, be able to immediately T-Wave the mouse hold and then just weather ball it for a KO with Pelipper and deny them from getting their Rage Fist set up. So I really liked being able to make some of those plays, and overall I found it really helpful, and I did get some really good paralysis rolls throughout my tournament run, so that was quite nice too. Then the next kind of Pokemon that I went with was Archaludon, because in a lot of previous formats, I was really building Grimmsnarl, Hisuian, and Gudra teams just because it gives you the instant kind of Fairy Steel Dragon core, which I think is really good. And Steel Dragon is just a busted typing. And so looking at this format, I was looking at Hisuian Gudra just because it's one of my other favorite Pokemon, but I really just could not justify it because I didn't feel like it was doing really well into a lot of what the early format was developing into. So the next best thing was Archaludon, and Archaludon Rain was looking like a really strong archetype. So looking at this Archaludon spread, to be honest with you, I'm kind of the type of person who EVs off of vibes rather than like running a bunch of calcs. The biggest thing that maybe people might notice is just how heavily defensive and especially defensive this Archaludon is. It's running just enough speed to outspeed, Dragapult and Tailwind, or after a Thunderbolt. After a Thunder Wave. And besides that, it's mostly max HP and near max special defense with, a special attack boosting nature. I just really wanted to go for basically that bulk because again what I found a lot through my practice and in the tournament run is through screens with Sinistra or even with friend guard from Mousehold, not a lot was really able to take down Archaludon once you got some defense boosts up or once you had a life screen up. And so that was kind of the synergy I was looking for going into this, especially since we lost the Urshifus and you don't have to worry about getting auto crit anymore. Being able to set up a lot of damage reduction and just stack that was something that I thought would be really useful. So looking at the set, I would say it's outside of the EVs, it is pretty standard minus Snarl over Flash Cannon. And the reason that I was running with Snarl over Flash Cannon is just because in this format, there were a lot of really good special attackers and not a lot of good users of Snarl. I think that we saw Dawe's team. They were running Struggle Bug on it, which was, another special attack um, dropping move. And I was just looking for something that could help get around things like, again, Goldango redirection, which I thought was going to be pretty popular and a pretty strong pick going into this tournament. And just the fact that it can do, not insignificant chip damage to ghost types that might try to wall body press. Obviously, one of the things that, people use to try to get around like a body press or a drain punch from Annihilape is Terra Ghost. And so there were a lot of games, again, both in practice and in the tournament, where you could just, get an electro shot off and then start clicking Snarl and into special attackers or ghost types. And that was proved to be really useful. And then obviously, again, with an assault vest and behind a light screen, like once you, hit a Snarl onto something, even, like a Life Orb Goldango at -1 is doing like 20% of your health if you have screens up with Assault Vest. And so it's a really good way to neutralize a lot of the special attacking threats that I saw kind of coming into the format. And then up next, obviously, Pelipper is the natural choice to pair with our Caledon. This Pelipper, a lot of people are running Focus Sash, but because I had screens and Pelipper's, its natural bulk isn't the best. It has really low base special defense, not a great HP stat, and like decent defense. But, I found that just through testing with screens, like Pelipper was living hits and it was even living some double ups from things. And so I felt really comfortable going with a modest Life Orb set. I had played at Indy, at the Indy Regional, I had played against Craig Campbell, who was also running like a modest Life Orb Pelipper. And he just absolutely destroyed me in Swiss. And I was just like shocked at how strong Life Orb Pelipper was. So that was actually the inspiration where that came from. And I just thought to myself, like, okay, I don't really, it's like, I don't really need to be worrying about getting one hit KO'd if I have like screens up. And I want this thing to be doing as much damage as it possibly can. And so that's why I ran it with Terra Stellar Life Orb, because Terra Stellar Life Orb was just knocking so many things out. There were some games where it's like, again, game one, if it looked like it would be advantageous, I could lead Grimmsnarl Pelipper and target down what looked like a threat immediately. I could like get a screen up, Terra Stellar the Pelipper, and take something out. Oftentimes, again, like I'll be talking about it a lot, but like Goldango was the target of a lot of that, just because Goldango is such a threatening mon once it snowballs with Nasty Plot. And so like being able to just Terra Stellar and nuke a Goldango with a Weather Ball turn one felt really good to me. So that was kind of, the reason why I ran that. And then the EV spread, kind of natural for, an attacker like this. It's just 252, modest nature. So overall, it felt like a really strong pick. And actually, I would say that Pelipper, outside of, our Caledon, was, again, one of the other MVPs of the team. Going into some of the other mons, the next thing that I added was the Sinistra. Again, because I think survivability is so important when you're looking at a team like this. Especially, with the screens and with a Pokemon like our Caledon that can get defense boost through stamina, has an assault vest. You have to make sure that, it's kind of the protect the queen strategy. You have to make sure that it's actually living attacks and you can heal it up. And so, like I mentioned at the beginning, I was originally looking at Amoonguss because obviously Spore is a really strong option. And the one that I was running was the Clear Smog variant. For opposing like Dondozo or other Arcalodon that turn to grass to avoid Spore. But ultimately, I ended up going with Sinistra just because I think Sinistra is an absolutely cracked Pokemon. I mean, its support move pool is crazy. This set doesn't have it, but it also has like Rage Powder. Like you could run a boosting Sinistra if you wanted. Being able to switch in and immediately heal your ally for 25% and not have to worry about like clicking a Pollen Puff into it is really great. And its signature move Machagacha is also just insane. I mean, a spread Giga Drain that can also burn your opponent is really crazy in my opinion. So that's kind of where I leaned towards it next. The EV spread, again, pretty basic. You're kind of just maxing out your bulk. More special defense than defense, just to avoid giving P2 a special attack boost. I believe it's only just like a couple of points above the defense just to avoid that download boost. And then the move set I was running, again, very supportive. Citrus Berry to help take hits on the switch in or survive under screens. Life Dew to make sure that either Archaludon or Annihilape stayed healthy. Trick Room just as another form of speed control. Originally, I did have Rage Powder over Trick Room, and I believe Shadow Ball over Strength Sap. But I ended up completely just changing the set the night before, just because I was looking at what I thought people might bring. And Dozo kind of scared me going into this team, and I think that between Strength Sap and the burn chance on Machigacha, like Sinistra's a pretty effective Dozo answer. And then Trick Room, just in case I couldn't get a Tailwind or some Thunder Waves off in a game. A lot of this team is, I would say, like, at least the core pieces of it, Grimmsnarl, Pelipper, especially the Archaludon, are all slow. So Trick Room is just like a really nice option there, especially if you're facing down Tailwinds. And Sinistra honestly put in a lot of work during Baltimore. I think it's one of the sole reasons why I was actually able to win that set against Wolfie that I played, in the last round of Swiss going into Top Cut. So it was just a really effective piece of the team, and overall was really great for the survivability. And then finally, just the last two pieces I added were, the Mouse Ape mode. And just because I think it's, Mouse Ape is, again, kind of cracked. It forces people to play mind games, especially when you have a team like this that realistically there's a lot of leads that you have to consider. Like, do you just run, Mousehold Annihilape with Arc Pelipper in the back? Do you lead Mousehold Archaludon and get beat up off into body press stuff, right? Do you lead Grimmsnarl Annihilape and just start boosting with, bulk up in a screen? And so I thought that it was, again, a really effective option to kind of throw opponents off and make them maybe have to plan for leads that are threatening to their team, and make sure they get kind of that lead call out correct. But again, looking at these pieces, I would say Mousehold, pretty standard supportive set. Before I was running not any speed investment and then some HP and then investment in bulk. But after talking with my friends Benji and Emily, who were staying with me at Baltimore and competing, they kind of talked me into like, hey, you should probably be running max speed Mousehold. Otherwise, it's really hard to get any kind of setup off. And, I ended up agreeing with them. And I think that definitely was the correct take on it there. But, safety goggles, beat up, taunt, follow me, protect, pretty standard with Terra Ghost. And then finally the Annihilape set, and this is the one that I think I changed the most the night before the tournament, actually. And again, this is what kind of my friends have kind of like talked me into a little bit. I originally was running like a really bulky Annihilape with it had the safety goggles and then leftovers. Mousehold was like Citrus Berry before, and Sinistra was like a Wiki Berry or something like that. And then kind of like looking at my team, again, if there's one thing about a SplattyDaddy team, it's that there's usually not a lot of attack or special attack EV investment. I typically rely on like outbulking people, and just looking at what was happening within the metagame and how my team stacked up, kind of talking with my friends, we decided that I needed some form of, potential burst damage besides the Pelipper. And so I just ended up saying, okay, you know what? I don't think a lot of people are prepping for max speed Annihilape. And it would be great to, again, outrun Goldango without Tailwind. And so I ended up changing up the set. And because I was not running any bulk on it, I was kind of looking for another item besides leftovers, because even, with screens and things like that, with no bulk investment on Annihilape, it's not super tanky. And so leftovers just didn't make a lot of sense to me. So I was kind of like, talking with my friends and joking about it, like, oh, what if we put on like a spell tag or a spooky plate? And then they said, wait, check out the calcs for that. And so we started going through a list of some of the common Pokemon and, beat up into max attack, spell tag, Annihilape was just destroying so much of the metagame. Like it was, I think 9 times out of 10, an Oko onto Archaludon. It always Oko to Moongus, which was, the standard like bulky defensive Amoonguss set, which was really crazy. And so I just thought to myself that like a lot of people are not going to be prepping for that. And it has a pretty decent speed tier, so why not? But yeah, those were kind of the last two added. And again, I think really good utility out of those. And especially with Friend Garden screens, like there was a lot of times where I could just look at matchups and say, like, do I even need Rain to make Archaludon effective? And if it looked like Body Press, could take care of most of the opposing trainer's team, I would just run something like Mousehold Archaludon with like Grimmsnarl, Sinistcha in the back, and then rely on like Friend Guard screens, healing, and just Body Press through a team. So overall, that was kind of like the idea going into it, is just looking at, what are some of the bulkiest mons that I can use? How can I make them bulkier? How can I ensure that they survive? And how can I ensure that, as the game progresses, I can outdamage my opponent?
Yeah, and yeah, it makes a lot of sense, especially like you said. It's really hard to KO any and all of your Pokemon with screens up, with Fred Guard, and so having those damage boost items is pretty cool. It's something we see very often, but yeah, it doesn't make really like, why would you need a Focus Sash when you just have bulk, right?
Right.
And so and so I guess from there, let's talk about how you actually play the team. Did you have some common leads that you did, or common game plans that you executed, or did you have some idea of how you wanted to play into the teams that you expected to face in the metagame?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's actually really funny. I would say like my most common lead when I was going back and looking through, the spreadsheet that I had in prepping for this tournament, my most common lead and effective lead was Grimmsnarl Pelipper. I think that, it was a really great combination because again, you have the option to, turn one, get up screens, protect Pelipper, get up a screen, switch an Archaludon to take a hit in the Pelipper slot if you think attacks are going into it, and automatically get a defense boost. Or again, go for the play, which is turn one Thunder Wave, something that looks like an offensive threat, and just take it out with, Pelipper's really strong attacks. So I would say that that was probably my most common lead. Besides that, the other one was Grimmsnarl Archaludon, just because, it's, again, very effective if you can get those screens up right away and then just start stacking stamina boosts if they try to hit your Archaludon through screens with, Pelipper and Sinistcha in the back. I would say, honestly, the four that I brought most was Grimmsnarl, Pelipper, Archaludon, and Sinistcha. I'd say most of my games ended up going that way. Again, if it looks like it was a game where I really needed body press, then I would lead something like Mousehold Archaludon. And I think that there was only, out of all of my sets that I played, surprisingly, Annihilape was my least brought mon. I think I may have brought it to 4 or 5 games overall. So out of everything on the team, the Annihilape actually had, I would say, the least amount of impact. And so I just ended up saying, like, you know what? I think the screens are Caledon Rain mode with Sinistcha healing is the most effective. So those are kind of typically the combinations that I would end up going for. So definitely Grimmsnarl Pelipper, Grimmsnarl Archaludon, or Mousehold Archaludon. I can't really think of any games where I just flat out led Pelipper Archaludon, just because, in those situations, I would say, a strong double up from the opposing team is really, really bad, especially since Archaludon can't protect. So usually I'd want to bring Archaludon in on a spot where I already had a screen set up, just to make sure it had that survivability. So yeah, typically you're looking at Grimmsnarl Pelipper or Grimmsnarl Archaludon with some Mousehold Archaludon leads.
Yeah. And so with that, let's talk about the tournament itself. So you had a crazy run throughout the tournament. Like you went X1 through Swiss. I think you're one of the top couple seeds, including beating Wolf in the last round. So talk to me about and of course, you only ended up losing to the winner of the tournament. So
Yeah.
talk to me about your tournament run and some of the highlight matches that you played.
Yeah, so you know what was really funny too? So looking at it, I actually, outside of having practiced with the team since the beginning of August, I did not get a lot of practice in right before the tournament itself. I don't think that I actually even like touched, Showdown or played, any prep games against friends for like the 2 weeks before Baltimore happens, maybe a week and a half. So what I was actually really shocked by was like the development of the Flamigo team that I saw a couple times throughout the tournament. The Porygon Trick Room stuff and Sneasler especially. When I originally built this team, I did not see Sneasler anywhere at all at the on the ladder, and obviously people ended up picking it up because it was a really good pick going into this metagame and into this tournament. So I was actually really terrified once I started playing in Swiss because, I just started seeing some teams that I was not at all prepped for, especially with the fighting types. That was one of the reasons I had so much faith in our Caledon, is because looking at the early meta, I was like, there are no good fighting types in this format, so you don't even have to really worry about it. And then you start seeing like, Flamigo teams pop up and Sneasler teams pop up, and that was pretty terrifying overall. But yeah, so looking at my run, I would say, some of the games that I really enjoyed, playing against Olivia, also known as, I believe it's Timbits, and then Toller Webb on day one was both really fun. They were both running the kind of same, again, that Flamigo team that we saw, on stream. And while it was terrifying to play against, it was fun trying to figure out the matchup in real time. Because again, I just had no clue that something like this would be coming to the tournament. And honestly, I think it's a pretty negative matchup into my team, just because Flamigo is absolutely cracked, especially with that Terra Stellar that Olivia's Flamigo had. Close Combat and Brave Bird were just doing so much damage, even through screens. And then that set, I kind of won because I got some lucky para rolls and just made some good plays. Game one of that set was really awful for me because I led, I believe it was Mouse Ape lead. And it turns out, Flamigo and Annihilape were speed tying, and I ended up just losing a speed tie in game one after I had already like Terra Annihilape into Terra Dragon, and Flamigo just took it out. And from there, I just did not have enough offense to get through the rest of the team. So I had to, pivot and ended up just going back with the Arc Rain stuff, getting some lucky T-Wave rolls. So those were really fun sets. Again, the only other game that I dropped in Swiss was to Toller. Or the only game I dropped in Swiss was to Toller, who again I believe finished top 4, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, so I couldn't even be, mad at that my 2 losses overall at the tournament were to someone who was top 4 and then the person who won the entire thing. But yeah, that Flamigo team was really interesting. And honestly, I'm a big fan of Flamigo, and back even in like Reg G, I was trying to look at a way to make it work because Scrappy is a great ability, and I believe it might be the only Scrappy mon that gets Faint, which is really, really interesting because being able to break through, protect on ghost types with Faint is a really cool tech. Obviously, these Flamingos didn't bring it. They opted for Wide Guard instead, for, things like Goldango, which I think is also a very valid and smart move. But yeah, overall, I was really surprised to see it, come to the tournament and really perform so well. So those were, some really fun teams to play against. And then looking at sort of like the rest of the runs that I got into. The game against Sam Daniker, which again was the Sneasler team with Redirection. You also had King Gambit. And it was Terrifying Acrobatic Sneasler, which once again is just like so terrible when you have something like Annihilape, Sinistra, Terragrass, Arcaladon. That was a really difficult team to navigate around. I'm quite lucky that none of these were boosting mons outside of the Primarina next to Clefable, because I do actually think that that's one of the tougher matchups for my team composition, is something like Clefable next to like Swords Dance King Gambit, Swords Dance Sneasler, I think we've seen before as well. And that can like snowball very quickly, only because you can't get Annihilape set up with Rage Fist unless you taunt the Clefable first, and then they get, a Swords Dance up and can just start running through your team. So I was very fortunate that that wasn't the case. At least with the King Gambit, he did have the Swords Dance Sneasler, but it was, close combat acrobatics and not Dire Claw, which I think is a tiny bit scarier, just because again, Dire Claw is such a cracked move. So that also, I believe, went to a game 3. And I think that one I was able to pull out because I was able to navigate into a situation where Sneasler had activated Unburden, and I was able to get a T-Wave off into a Tailwind on Pelipper, which let me outspeed it with the rest of my team and take it down. So that was a very fun one. And then looking at the rest of kind of my schedule, obviously the thing that I was most proud of and also truly shocked by was winning against Wolfie, because talking with my friends about that potential matchup against both Wolf and Justin, who was running the same team as Wolf, we looked at this and said, this is an auto loss for my team, just because, as you can probably see on my team sheet, my entire team relies on its abilities. So we were kind of joking around the night before day 2, and we were like, okay, so somehow if I get unlucky enough to pull Justin or Wolf in Swiss on day 2, or have to face off against them in Top Cut, like, how do we even beat this? And one of my friends was joking, and he said, just forfeit because you can't. And I was like, well, I don't think that's true. There has to be some line of play that works. And we ended up finding it, and it ended up working pretty effectively. We ended up finding 2 lines of play that could potentially work. The first of which was lead Mousehold and Pelipper, and assuming that it's going to be a wheezing lead next to whatever. It was basically like Mousehold, Pelipper, turn 1 Terra Stellar the Pelipper, and just hit a raw Hurricane onto Wheezing and take it out. And that's actually what ended up happening in game 1 of that set with Wolfie, which I got so lucky because obviously, burning your Terra turn 1 into a move with 70% accuracy is an absolutely terrible feeling. But, at this point when you're playing against someone like Wolf, who is just one of the best Pokemon players and who is running a team that pretty much hard counters mine, you just got to play to whatever outs you think you can find. So that ended up being what it was. I believe that Wolfie led both games. He led Typhlosion, Wheezing, and had Pawmont Garchomp in the back. And so, turn 1, game 1, he just clicks, Eruption into like a Mousehold that had protected, does a little under 50% to the Pelipper, and my Pelipper, Terra Stellar, removed the Wheezing with a Hurricane. I got very lucky that it hit, and then from there, abilities went up, and in the back I had our Caledon Sinistra, and because Wolfie didn't bring Corviknight at all, Sinistra was really good into the back of Garchomp and Pawmont, and so basically from there, was able to remove the Typhlosion from play, get the Sinistra in, get Trick Room up, and just get into a position where it was Sinistra versus Garchomp and Pawmont, and Pawmont can't really do much to Sinistra. And I believe that Garchomp, even though it was Life Orb, with Citrus Berry, Dragon Claw was still only like a 3-hit KO onto the Sinistra, and I had the advantage with, Machagacha healing. So that was really great. And then the second line of play, which I brought out in game 2, was just Mousehold Annihilape, and again, turn 1 Terran to Dragon to avoid an eruption off of Typhlosion and KO the Wheezing with Rage Fist, which worked, and with Pelipper and Sinistra in the back, again, being able to get up Trick Room and then just take out the back of Garchomp and Pawmont under Trick Room, proved to be the winning strategy there. I think that had Wolf brought probably Corviknight, I think things would have been a lot different. Just because Corviknight, I think would easily wall out Sinistra and be able to take it out with Brave Bird, even if it does get burned. So I was surprised that he didn't bring that to game two, especially because I thought that that was a pretty solid guess. But maybe he was worried about, our Caledon in the back with both Electroshot and Draco Meteor. So yeah, I was super shocked. I mean, I think that for most people, probably pulling, someone like Wolf anytime in Swiss, whether it be day one or day two, is a feeling of dread. And that's certainly how I felt. And I was definitely very proud of myself for being able to identify, those lines of play with the help of my friends. And I'm glad that they worked out for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds like the prep definitely paid off. I think that's no one expects you to go for Stellar Hurricane turn one without rate up. But like, yeah,
Yeah.
if you've thought about the matchup a little bit and you're willing to go for that line, I think it's going to catch people off guard. And yeah, I love the play. I love the fact that you just kind of went for it, and I think it was the right thing to do. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it's one of those things too, especially, and I would say for a really negative matchup like this one, where if it's your only option, then like, yeah, what else are you gonna do? You're gonna hope that you hit the hurricane is basically it. And I said to myself, if I lose to Wolfie, like if I get 2-0'd by Wolfie, I can't even be upset because again, Wolf is one of the goats of this game. So I just thought to myself going into the match, you know what, have fun, pray that your moves hit, and if they do, figure it out from there. And that's what happened. So I was really happy with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so with that, you had already locked up cut at that point, but this locked up the buy into
The
the top
bye,
16 for
yeah.
you, which is really nice. And so you get to play against the eventual champion. Spoilers. Against Nick. Tell me about your top 16 set.
Yeah, so that was a really fun set. And first of all, again, Nick was like so inspiring to find out that that was like his first ever kind of real tournament experience and that he just, stomped his way to winning the regional. It was like so impressive. And he was also just like a really chill, nice, humble dude. So even though I ended up losing this one and it took me out of, contention for the top eight, it was really fun. And this was also the first rain kind of mirror that I had played throughout the entire tournament. And now, in my practice sets, I actually felt that like the rain mirror was pretty advantageous for me, just because, with screens up, being able to basically survive, kind of outlive other rain teams, especially like other Arcalodons, attacks from Basque Legion, things like that. I felt like it was a pretty positive matchup for me. And then it turns out when I was talking to him before the set started, he was like, oh yeah, this is like the fifth rain mirror that I've played, and this team was specifically designed to beat other rain mirrors. I was just like, okay, that's good to know. And I honestly do think the biggest difference maker for him here in between our teams was the mouse hold. With the population bomb. Obviously, we saw how well that worked out for him throughout his top eight run and his eventual win. And I thought that that was, a really interesting and good adaptation to have on this team, just because you kind of have to respect population bomb, right? It does a crazy amount of damage, and unless you have like a ghost type, seal type, or like a rocky helmet, there's not a lot you can do against it. And so being able to have the population bomb, especially against, with his own Arcalodon, I thought was really, really a cool tech for him to have. And so game one, we both ended up leading I believe we both ended up leading like our mouse hold Arcalodons, and I just ended up I clicked Terra Ghost on my mouse hold, follow me, and he, hit Pop Bomb and tried to do, Pop Bomb body press and was able to bypass that. Actually, no, game one, sorry, it wasn't mouse hold Arcalodon. I led mouse hold Grimmsnarl, and basically I was just trying to like get screens set up and then, paralyze all of his Pokemon and hope I could win out that way, which turns out was not a winning strategy. Game one actually went all the way down to timer in the end. So it ended up with it being like his max, maxed out +6 Archaludon and Amoonguss versus my maxed out defense Archaludon plus Sinistra, and I didn't Terragrass the Archaludon. So basically, I had paired both his Amoonguss and Archaludon, and he just kept getting like 3-turn sleep spores on me. I kept getting good para rolls on him. And what it came down to in that game one is, we are coming down on timer. I think I may have had the health advantage at the end. And then literally the very last turn, he just clicks body press into my Archaludon and crits. So like right as the timer ran out, my Archaludon just died to a crit. And I said, okay, I guess that's game one. Which, you can't even really be mad when that stuff happens, because again, especially playing like a really bulky screens team, I understand that the one thing that you can always count on is like you will be crit at the most inconvenient moment, and you kind of just have to live with it. So it was a funny but very painful way for game one to end in that set. Although, to be honest, I think that I could have potentially pulled out the win had my lines of play been a bit better. I was consistently attacking into his Archaludon, trying to fish out for a crit onto his Archaludon, which had Terragrassed, when realistically the better line of play there would have just been to keep focusing down the Amoonguss on the turns that I was awake, because body press I think would have ended up being like a 4-hit KO. It was doing like 40 to 45% to his Amoonguss, like after all of the stamina stacks. So yeah, I think my targeting there in game one was just not the best, which was really unfortunate. Game two of that set, I ended up leading Mousehold Annihilape into his Pelipper Archaludon lead, and turn one, I just, Terra Dragon to avoid a Hurricane knockout, click beat up, and one-shot his Archaludon. And from there, I think he ends up he just ended up forfeiting maybe on the third or fourth turn, just because I don't think that there was a lot he could do after Archaludon went down, because I still, my Archaludon was live in the back. I still had Sinistra, and so I think from there he kind of recognized it was over. And then game three is where he really honestly just got me with his adjustments. I think both of us didn't want to do Mousehold Archaludon again. We didn't want the potential of that going back down to timer, and with all the things that came along with that. So he ended up leading Pelipper and Basculegion against my like Grimmsnarl, Pelipper, and I got, Reflect Up, and his Basculegion just clicked like Terra Water, Wave Crash, and took out Grimmsnarl. And from there, he was really honestly just able to very effectively snowball against the rest of my team, especially since I didn't have a light screen up to prevent his Archaludon from doing damage. So ultimately in that game three, he, won off of his really good play and simply just making, better adjustments than me. And I wonder, because, I led Grimmsnarl Pelipper, I was thinking about it after, and I was like, even if I switched in Archaludon into the Grimmsnarl slot, which was a play I had been, considering, I don't know if it would have made that much of a difference, because Terra Water, Mystic Water in the rain is just a crazy amount of damage, even if you resist it and get the stamina boost. So yeah, from there it was pretty much over. And it was like the one and only rain mirror in my tournament, which I felt pretty confident beating, because I had beat a lot of them in practice. I ended up losing to, and I think it's because he really just had kind of like the better rain setup into mine. But overall, it was a very fun set, especially because, again, he's a really nice and humble dude, and just had this very like chill energy about him. So it was fun to like kind of chat with him and everything like that. And I told him as I was walking away from the table, as I usually do to people, I'm like, well, if you knocked me out here, please win. And obviously he went on to win the full thing. So again, can't even be mad that both times I've made it to a day two, I end up losing to the eventual winner. So I hope that at some point I can break that curse and obviously get myself into a top 8 and hopefully a regional win. But so far, I found it, pretty humorous. And again, getting into top 16 is not something that I even expected coming into this tournament. Like, really, the goal that I set for myself was I would love to get to another day two. And, I far and away exceeded that goal. And so I'm really happy with, how it turned out. And even though I didn't get into top eight, again, that top 16 match, was a very fun match to play.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think, like you said, Nick, such a nice guy. We had him on Top Takes last week and got to chat with him a little bit there. And I think he was what I was so impressed by when I was watching him play, watching this regional at home, was he was making the perfect adjustments. It felt like going into game 2 and game 3 every time, and so I was very impressed by his play as well. Really cool to see him do well. Really cool to see you do well too, especially with a team that you've been building for, or you've been using for so long, this Grimmsnarl Annihilape archetype that has really picked up recently, largely partially because of your performance at this event. And so, yeah, I hope that other people get to experiment a little bit with this team comp because it looks really strong. And yeah, definitely recommend people try it out. As per usual, the paste will be in the description and the rental code is on screen right now. So definitely recommend that you try this team out. And yeah, thank you for taking the time to talk about your tournament run and explain your entire team to everyone. Did you have any final words or shoutouts that you want to give?
Yeah, I guess in terms of shout outs, again, thank you so much to my buddy Jude, who helped me look at the team, really helped me, with some EV spreads, terra types, and actually getting the Pokemon in game. Shout out to my friends Benji and Emily, who are at the tournament with me, kind of helped, support me throughout the tournament and with some lines of play. Everyone in the FDL Discord, who's always been, big supporters of me, especially when I've been going to these in-person events and really hyping me up. And yeah, finally, thanks to you, Adi. Again, I am really like humbled and very happy to see that. I saw that you were shouting me out a little bit on Tub Nation and Tub Takes and saying like, oh, I really hope that Ethan gets a chance to be on stream. I do too. One of these days I will be making it to a, to a regional stream, fingers crossed. But, I know that you've shouted me out before and obviously you've had me on the channel before. And I really do appreciate your support, especially as someone who I really, respect within this community and see as, a really great both player and someone who can analyze this game. So, I appreciate your support and for, having me back on your channel. And hopefully the next one of these team reports I do with you can be when I win a regional.
Thank you. Yeah, I hope so too. Like I said, I've been a fan ever since that Players Cup 3 run. I've been so impressed with your team building and so impressed with your play. This team, again, super cool, very innovative. Not something that I'd been looking at going into the regional, and then especially with the picks like the spell tag Annihilate, the Sinistcha Chesset. Just things that we haven't really seen, but you always manage to find a way to put something creative together that does really well. So yeah. And with that, like I said, definitely recommend that you try this team out. Thank you again for taking the time, and congratulations again on your top 16 run. And yeah, until next time, I will see you all later.